Greetings from Costa Rica. I'm Miriam Vilela, the Executive Director of Earthcharter International and our Education Center that is located here on the campus of the University for Peace in Costa Rica. And again, I want to welcome everyone who is joining us and invite you to write your name, introducing yourself, indicating where you are and where do you work. And I'm welcoming you to this wonderful masterclass with Mary Evelyn Tucker, which will be really a wonderful opportunity for us to reflect and learn about eco-spirituality, eco-justice, mindfulness with Mary Evelyn Tucker and how that relates to education. So this session is part of our masterclass program that is developed as part of many activities that we develop under our UNESCO chair on education for sustainable development with the Earthcharter. I'm very honored and happy to have Mary Evelyn Tucker here with us today. Thank you so much for joining us, Mary. I actually just went through a long trip to China and back to the US. So while I'm inviting all of you to tell us where you are, your name, maybe your organization affiliation, so that we have an idea of who are joining us today. Let me take this time to introduce Mary Evelyn Tucker. Although she is Mary Evelyn Tucker, I'm a great fan and admirer. She's the co-director and co-founder with John Green of the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology. They are affiliated faculty with the Yale Center for Environmental Justice at Yale School of the Environment. And together with John Green, she co-authored the book Ecology and Religion and co-edited, of course, many books, but one of them is the Routledge Handbook of Religion and Ecology. I met Mary Evelyn over 25 years ago. She was a very active member of the Earthcharter Drafting Committee, and of course offered significant input to the drafting process of the Earthcharter, and was a member of the Earthcharter International Council for many years. So this masterclass is really a huge opportunity to directly learn from her, this very special human being that is here with us today. And among other things, I'm of course very curious, Mary Evelyn, if I may ask, by the way, how did you how did you become involved in spirituality and looking at this intersection between religion and eco-spirituality?
Well, that's a great question, Miriam, and it's such a joy to see you and your colleagues, Maria and Alicia and Amanda and everyone on this Zoom. I'm very honored by your presence and your interest in this topic and your support of the Earthcharter and educational issues. So how did I become interested is a great question, because our teacher, Thomas Berry, over 40 years ago was talking about the issues we're facing environmentally, socially, and so on. Sorry. Are we okay now? So should I repeat what I said? I can't hear you, Miriam.
Yeah, Thomas Berry, 40 years.
Good. So he inspired us in this work because he was a great historian of religion, and we felt religion and ethics and spirituality could contribute to the environment, not just science, policy, law, technology, and economics. So that's the short version. We began our work at Harvard in the mid-90s, surveying all the world's religions, 10 conferences on the Asian religions, the Western religions, and indigenous religions, some of which I'm going to talk about today, what they can contribute to our understanding of a eco-spirituality and eco-justice perspective on the environment. So that's the short version. Thomas Berry's inspiration, the Harvard conferences over 3 years on the world's religions that brought scholars and environmentalists from all over the world, and 10 volumes were published by Harvard on that topic. We came to Yale because Gus Speth, the great environmentalist, said exactly that. We need not just science and policy, but religious, spiritual, ethical values. So we've been here 17 years. And while we're retiring from teaching this year, we're very active and eager to be in touch with, of course, the Earth Charter and help it into its next stages. And so we're not retiring, we're refiring, we're saying. So that's the short version. So shall I begin my PPT?
Yes, please. And
Okay.
I'm thrilled to know that you are retiring for a few things, but getting re-energized to engage even more. You will really
Indeed.
need much more of these, and also the experience that you bring in.
Well, and we hopefully in the Q&A, I can talk a little bit more about this 3 weeks in China. We just got back a day or so ago, and it was an amazing experience. So this topic of mindfulness as eco-spirituality is because so many people are thinking about mindfulness, but we want to make sure it's not just for the self, but it's for the Earth community. That's the point here. And the University of Connecticut is setting up a whole program on this topic. So it relates directly to education. We're having a big meeting on Monday about it. And for a secular university like Connecticut to do this means, it's going to spread and it's going to have roots elsewhere. So this is some of the links to the educational work being done with Miriam and others at the University for Peace. So let's see. So the challenge of the polycrisis that we know is that now mindfulness calls us to eco-spiritualities that connect humans, all species, the living earth, and the sacred universe. So the polycrisis, meaning economic, social, political, and environmental crises. So mindfulness for Earth connects human consciousness and awareness of the present moment with an appreciation of the Earth's ecosystems that we inhabit. Again, not just for our own serenity or salvation, but this connection to the living Earth community is what's implied here. So eco-spirituality is an appreciation for the sacred universe out of which the Earth evolved. And that's Thomas Berry's term, the sacred universe. And valuing the complexity of Earth and the interdependence of all life systems. That's what the Earth Charter contributes in a huge way. Now, a realization then that human life comes from the universe, and thus we are responsible for the continuity of the Earth community. That's the point here. We emerge from the Earth community and the universe. So the environmental crisis is a spiritual crisis because, as I've said, we have the science and policy, law and economics and technology to make the transition to a flourishing future. This is present everywhere, new ecological economics, alternative technologies, and so on. But the moral force for change is still missing. And that's what we have to develop in ourselves and our communities for this great transition. So what's missing? This need for spiritual energies to overcome despair and disempowerment, especially of youth. We all feel this. We're on the edge of despair at times and disempowerment. So that's the power of what Thomas Berry has offered that's in this PPT. So the spiritual, not religious, we want to open that question that it's a broad search for meaning, purpose, and belonging, despite eco-anxiety. And on our forum on Religion and Ecology website, we now have a huge section on eco-anxiety that's emerging all over the world, including in China, as we discover. So how to live life with a connection to others, to nature, and to the universe. That's what we're talking about. And again, I want to emphasize, this isn't religion in an institutional or narrow sense. It's an eco-spirituality. And we know religions have their problems. We're fully aware of that. They also have their promise for change. But the spiritual energies are in particular that which can energize us for the changes. So we're in the midst of the stress of the climate emergencies. We saw it all summer long. We're all very aware of this, of climate refugees. The Pope just went to Marseille to help elevate the notion of refugees. We have them here in the US on our borders. It's a huge issue. And that's where eco-justice matters for the humans who are suffering the effects of climate change. We also have, in addition to climate change, pollution all around the world. We've done a conference on the Yamuna River, and here it is in Delhi. This is the sacred river of India. So we know the issues as the UN Environment Program defines it. It's climate change, it's pollution issues, and it's also biodiversity loss. We're in the midst of a 6th extinction period. And the scientists recognize this. This is not something new. The Montreal conference this past year illustrated the role of religions in valuing all species on the planet. So here we have this tremendous sense of loss and sadness of endangered species that are right before us. How can we respond with a sense of awe and action? So the response then is responsibility, a mindfulness of the living Earth community and all its species and ecosystems. So awe and action. Ecospirituality gives us this sense of wonder and beauty of creation, inspires us every day. A place like Costa Rica with tremendous biodiversity and all around the planet. How can we continue to be inspired by this? It also brings us in conjunction with ecojustice and action, the care for people and the planet. Just as the Pope's encyclical says, cry of the earth, cry of the poor. So Thomas Berry was a great inspiration for us, but also for many, many people. And his early book in 1988, The Dream of the Earth, said we need a new dream of the planet and its powerful, unfolding, dynamic, evolutionary processes. Evening Thoughts, it's one of his other book of essays, The Great Work, many, many people know. And I want to just draw our attention to The Sacred Universe, which we edited for Columbia. And when, again, a secular university like Columbia said, let's have the title of one of his essays as the title of the book, The Sacred Universe, that's fantastic. Because as we know, secular academia kind of rejects this spiritual approach. So the sacred universe is the ultimate context for everything that we're trying to do collectively for this great transition. Now, again, let's look at eco-spirituality, define it a little bit more carefully. And this is Thomas Berry, who says, at its core, even our spirituality is earth-derived. The human and the earth are totally implicated each in each other. This is not something we get from outside, from a transcendent God. Eco-spirituality is in the ecosystems itself. That's why the Earth Charter begins with this sense of ecological integrity as the 3 main principles: ecological integrity, social economic justice, democracy, nonviolence, and peace. That's the brilliance of the Earth Charter, to say ecological integrity is everything we depend on. So Thomas Berry would say, if there's no spirituality in the earth, then there's no spirituality in ourselves. So I hope you can read this essay on the spirituality of the earth that says this so beautifully. Now, the spiritual presence in all of life, again, Berry says, we can no longer hear the voice of the rivers, to make sure I have the whole thing, of the rivers, the mountains, or the sea. The trees and meadows are no longer intimate modes of spiritual presence. The world about us has become an it rather than a thou. That's Martin Buber, who was talking about everything is a thou. Everything is related to everything else, not just outside of us in an objective way. So the call then is this reciprocity with nature. It's this renewed sense of reciprocity with nature in all of its complexity and remarkable beauty that can help provide the psychic and spiritual energies necessary for the work ahead. an antidote to despair and disempowerment, in other words. So ecology is living systems. Our studies in what we call ecology must lead us to such intimacy with our natural surroundings. Only intimacy can save us from our present commitment to a plundering industrial economy. Again, I think we understand this, but Berry puts it in a language that's very compelling and very inspiring. So here are the key ideas of Thomas Berry: that we need a new story. That was in 1978, so many years ago. Now, many people are talking about the need for new stories. And of course, this idea that we dwell in a sacred universe and we are in a living earth community. Again, the Earth Charter begins with this sense we're part of a vast evolving universe. Earth, our home, is alive with a myriad community of life. Again, the brilliance, the insight of the Earth Charter from 2000, this is 23 years ago, had these ideas in it and has it still. So that for Thomas Berry, Earth is a communion of subjects, not a collection of objects, one of his most famous sayings. And the great work is creating a flourishing future with both eco-spirituality and eco-justice. So we're putting together cosmology and ecology that's present in all the religions of the world. Cosmology, the unfolding of a universe, the stories of different religions, and the scientific telling of cosmology. But with the religions of the world, as we began it at Harvard in these conferences for 3 years and in the books for 7 years from the 1990s, that we're retrieving, we're reevaluating, and reconstructing the world's religions for their ecological phase, for saying these are not just human-God relations or even human relations, but they're human-earth relationships that we need to recover and reconstruct. So mindfulness then is eco-spirituality. Now, for example, I'll give some examples from the world's religions. That the sacred universe is creation, all of creation, and that the earth community is a rainbow covenant after the floods and so on, that this rainbow covenant came forward with the earth and the divine. A communion of subjects is this I-thou, as I've mentioned, with Martin Buber and others. And the great work is justice and mercy and a prophetic sensibility, very powerful in the Jewish tradition, as many of you know. Now, an example of this is Eco-Peace Middle East. And here's the statement that we are Jordanian, Palestinian, and Israeli. In other words, all the religions of the Abrahamic world. We are environmentalists working together to protect our water and our future. The Abrahamic traditions of Judaism, Christianity, Islam are working together, and they are developing a green-blue deal for the Middle East. It's a bold initiative to advance climate security. Tom Friedman, one of the strong writers for the New York Times, is a huge supporter of this. This isn't just a dream. And some of the leaders of it we know well. I hope one day they get a Nobel Peace Prize because they're training children. They're educating people to work together on climate security and the Jordan River for its purification and its continuity. Now, if we come to Christianity and an eco-spirituality, we have, as I've said, the sacred universe is all of creation. The earth community is a sense of the kingdom of God, but the movement is from an anthropocentric or human-centered to an eco-centered worldview. This is our great transition right now, right? To move from a sense we're the dominant species to an ecocentric or biocentric worldview. Again, a communion of subjects is this notion of incarnation, or the logos within all of reality, not just in a historical figure of Christ 2,000 years ago, but from the very beginning, as the Gospel of John says, in the beginning was the Word, was logos, an inner reflecting, ordering principle. Now, we can talk about this, but the theologians are beginning to develop this in an eco-spiritual sense. And the great work then is stewardship or creation care that the evangelicals work. And I feel, and many others do, we have to go beyond even stewardship to a new sense of what's flourishing, as Thomas Berry would say. What's our flourishing work? Now, Laudato Si, the Pope's encyclical of 8 years ago, is one of the most important examples from Christianity as we know. And a new one is coming out next week, October 4th, the Feast of St. Francis, a new encyclical called Laudato Deum, meaning praise to God. And this one is praise be. Laudato Si means praise be in ancient early Italian. Now, let me just say one other word, because I could do a whole talk just on Laudato Si. But because Leonardo Boff from Brazil and the Latin American community that developed a tremendous sense of cry of the earth, cry of the poor, that this is a major theme in Laudato Si. And Leonardo Boff, as Miriam knows well, because she's a good friend of his, not only is he a leading theologian, but he picked up Thomas Berry's ideas. He understands well why a universe story is important and why this people and planet conjunction is so crucial. So that's the exciting thing about Laudato Si, among many, many things. It brings eco-spirituality and eco-justice together. Now, if we go to Islam, the sacred universe is unity, or Tawhid. Everything has this inner unity of being. An earth community is community, the ummah, a sense that, again, we're pulled together as humans. Communion of subject means balance, mizan, and there's a whole statement on mizan from the Muslim community that you can look up. The great work is a sense of trusteeship, which I think is a beautiful term, better even than stewardship, because it means we are trustees for the future of the earth community. And we felt for a long time that the trusteeship council room at the UN should pick up on this idea, trusteeship not just for humans in a social political sense, but for the earth community. So let's see what may happen there. Now, the Islamic Foundation for Ecology and Environmental Sciences, based in the UK, says this is a call to Muslims to live up to the responsibility as guardians or Khalifa of Allah's creation and work towards leaving a livable earth for future generations. And Fazlun Khalid has been a great leader of that. I urge you to look at his work and the website as well. Now, I'm just briefly going to touch on some of the Asian eco-spiritual values. We've seen them just recently in China. Buddhism, of course, is about the interdependence of life. We're not isolated human beings. And we went to a monastery led by a nun with 80 nuns living there. And she's written 6 books in Chinese on Buddhism and ecology. And we're going to put them in the library here at Yale. A wonderful example of Buddhism and ecology. Confucianism has this incredible sense of qi, a unifying life force, matter and energy. I do Tai Chi, I'm sure some of you do that, or Qigong, or practice the traditional Chinese medicines, which have this sense as we cultivate our qi in relation to nature, to all ecosystems, we have this reciprocity and resonance in practice. And Confucianism is very much reviving its traditions in their environmental implications. Again, I can talk about that. That was part of our trip to China, Du Weiming being a great leader of that, and Miriam is in close touch with him as well, and a big supporter of the Earth Charter from the very beginning. Taoism has the sense that the body of the cosmos and humans are one, are resonating. So we're at a moment of expanding our sense. We're not just a human body or even an earth body. We're cosmic beings. And that's exceedingly inspiring, I think. Hinduism has always had this sense of a cosmic person, a Maha Purusha, the great person, and yoga with all of its wonderful movements. It's rising to the sun. It's imitating the animals and the birds and so on. Does a similar kind of thing, putting us in touch with Earth and cosmos. And Jainism, of course, has a deep sense of the sacredness of all life. Macrobiotic food systems come from that tremendous sense that we eat plants with reverence. And vegetarianism, of course, is growing in many parts of the world in that spirit. Now, we all know that the eco-spirituality of indigenous lifeways is huge and emerging in human consciousness as never before. My husband, John Grimm, specializes in this, likes to call it lifeways, not just religion. But the sacred universe is, of course, respecting Mother Earth. The Earth communities that all life is related, there's kinship, that the communion of subjects is interiority of our relations with trees, with plants, with animals, with birds, and that the great work is rekindling this relationality. We know Robin Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass, has brought forward traditional environmental knowledge and scientific knowledge. Again, the Earth Charter has a tremendous sense over and over again of respecting the culture and values and lifeways of indigenous peoples and their knowledge. Now, we have at Standing Rock in North Dakota and South Dakota, where the reservation is, a tremendous example of protecting water, that water is life. So they move from just protest to protection. It's a very deep sense of defending the sacred. Water is sacred. And while the issue was lost in the pipeline going under the river there, the Missouri River, nonetheless, this was the largest gathering of indigenous peoples and their supporters in history, actually. People came up from Latin America and all across North America and so on. And veterans came to support them and other major leaders. So it was a very moving event and still continues to be in the protection of water across North America and other parts of the world. And we want to especially highlight the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, which has come out of a process where Norway has said, we can't conserve rainforests without the voice of indigenous people. This happened at a meeting at the Vatican, where they had given over 12 years, $4 billion for rainforest protection. And they realized, no, it has to have the cultural values of indigenous peoples there, many of whom are at great risk for their life in what they're doing across Latin America and so on. So this initiative is of immense importance and ongoing of the United Nations Environment Program, the Norwegian government, the Forum on Religion and Ecology, and other religious-based groups. Now, cosmological and ecological spirituality, then, to summarize, is an appreciation for the sacred universe out of which Earth and life evolved and to which we belong. We can't say that enough. You know, in my morning prayer cycle, ritual cycle, I pray in the 4 directions with water, as a native person in British Columbia told us years ago. We need to embody this, right, in our practices, our mindfulness, our prayer life, our daily experience. So we ground ourselves in this cosmological and ecological spirituality. I have a long way to go, even though for decades I've been thinking about this. So we're all in a process. And if you look at the internet and the programs, it's exploding. Many, many people are thinking about these ideas. So I want to just reflect on the cosmological briefly as I come to a conclusion, maybe another 5 minutes, and we can open it up for some discussion. But as we meditate on the early universe and its great flaring forth into stars and galaxies and planetary systems, this brings up an enormous sense of mystery, of awe, of reverence. All our language for the divine or God just has to change when we think of this extraordinary 14 billion year unfolding universe. And again, that's exciting. That's exploding human imagination and experience. So the Hubble telescope is even superseded now by the Webb telescope. And the pictures that are coming back, scientists are weeping as they see the pictures of the early universe that were never available to us before. It's a very, very exciting time to meditate on this great mystery in which we live and dwell and have our being. So the sense of starburst, of supernovas, which is something that Brian talks about in our Journey of the Universe film, that the condensation of all these forces down into very, very hot, and then exploding into all the elements of life. This is a metaphor for so many ideas. What does it mean to be a sacrificial person, even in our moment? That the stars created all the birth of the elements of life. So as we say in Journey of the Universe, the stars are our ancestors. Now, everywhere around the world, we think about ancestors. And again, I've just come from China, where this is so important. And this is Golden Week, where they go back and visit family and the graves of ancestors. But they got immediately, we show Journey of the Universe in Chinese, they got this sense there's a cosmological ancestors here. And it expands and explodes our idea that our ancestors are only human. Now, here again, we have this emergence of galaxies colliding and creating new systems, eventually planetary systems. And we taught at Princeton some years ago, and even the extraordinary scientists at Princeton said, you know, we don't know fully how galaxies emerge. And that's the kind of humility that we all need, both scientists and environmentalists and spiritual seekers. Wow. This universe is so extraordinary that we just have a glimpse of its meaning, its depth, its purpose. Now, when we see, and this is from a friend out in Pennsylvania where we taught at Bucknell, when we see the Milky Way like this, we're like, oh my goodness, it's called the River of Heaven in East Asia. You know, again, that we're part of a galaxy of systems of stars. And now we know there's trillions of galaxies. And our scientists here at Yale are studying exoplanets and all this thing. But in the midst of this scientific study, we need to keep alive the sense of awe and wonder and meaning and purpose. We can't let the scientists say this is a purposeless, random universe. Have a nice day. We have to keep alive that peoples around the world, in Latin America, in Asia, have always had this sense. It's a meaningful universe. So what does this evoke in us then? Reverence, deep reverence, respect, and responsibility. So a reverence that's valuing the complexity of Earth and the profound interdependence of all life systems, which is throughout the Earth Charter, because the Earth Charter is a document that's not just a UN document, it's a spiritually grounded document. It has cosmology and eco-spirituality at its heart. So a reverence, we're in this phase of the moon, the full moon right now, and the equinox and changes all around the planet. The Chinese are exchanging moon cakes and celebrating this equinox of the moon and the solstice coming up in December. We're part of these systems of change that we can celebrate together. The rising of the sun is a morning ritual that religious people have done forever. This was important for Thomas Berry in his monastic life. The prayers of the dawn and the dusk. We can situate ourselves in these daily rhythms and seasonal rhythms. So here's the dusk that fills us with surprise and delight and awe, even as it changes. We just capture its fleeting beauty. So respecting all life then is a realization that all life is connected and emerged here on Earth after billions of years of evolution. 10 billion years of universe evolution, and 5.8 or 6 billion years, 4.8, I should say, 5 billion years of Earth's evolution. How can we take this in? We are only 200,000 years as Homo sapiens. We have a lot of growing and expanding to do, but that's part of the human imagination and spiritual quest. This photograph, as we know, changed everything for my generation, but still is a great inspiration to see our planet, our blue-green planet from space, and how precious it is. And whether there's life in the universe or not, I'm agnostic about. It's this blue-green planet that is so special that requires our attention. We don't need to go to space to try and create colonies in space. We need to protect this only living planet that we know. And that sense of being surrounded by water, by clouds, by dynamic changes. And as we flew, of course, from China across the Pacific and the North American continent, you get this renewal, again, of mystery, of awe, respect, reverence. And the mountains that have arisen from great geological changes, from the rising up of continental systems, from plate tectonics, which we didn't even know about even 100 years ago. So plate tectonics are part of this moving, dynamic sense of a volcanic Earth community. So we're responsible then for the future life, for the care and continuity of the living Earth community, of rainforests, of river systems, of fish and coral reefs, of birds, of humans, of next generations who are calling to us for an intergenerational handshake in this great moment of transition. So the emerging expressions are here. This mindfulness for Earth is exploding. Art, dance, music, literature, and poetry is fulfilling that call of the human spirit. Ritual and prayer and sermons are being developed. Here at Yale, the students at the Divinity School want to minister to eco-anxiety and create rituals. The rights of nature, as we know, again, developed strongly in Latin America, but around the world for the rights of rivers, of ecosystems, of lakes and forests. And I think one of the most powerful signs of this is sentience, knowing, if you will. The words are difficult to embody, but that plants, trees, birds, fish, animals, all have their own ways of knowing. Like we know the root systems of trees communicate. We had 9,000 people on a webinar here at Yale to talk about roots and forests and their communication. And we certainly know the songs of birds, of marine mammals, of whales and dolphins and so on. This is an exciting explosion from science and from ecologists and from the Earth community, and understanding we're not the only ones with ways of knowing. So finally, Journey of the Universe, I hope that you can share it, enjoy it. We'll give you links. We'll send out the flyers so you can have the film to use in your communities. It's been translated into Spanish and French and Chinese and Italian. But this Journey of the Earth, it came out of Thomas's idea that we need a new story. It's indebted to the new story of Barry. It was an Emmy Award-winning film. There's a book from Yale Press translated into Chinese. There's podcasts and interviews that are from the early times to now. There's classes on Coursera, which are free. I hope that you can make use of these in your community in any way possible. It's just all open source. But the podcasts in particular, our distributor loves because it's interviews with the scientists who deepen our sense of understanding of the universe unfolding. And there's 10 of those, and 10 with environmentalists who are saying, okay, what does this mean for the growth of ecological civilization and practice? Eco-cities, eco-economics, eco-education, eco-arts, and so on. Some of the great leaders in these movements talk about what's needed and what's happening. So I hope those can give you the sense this is a beautiful film, but it has practice, ideas and action coming together. So mindfulness within an eco-spiritual story of evolution. This is my concluding slide for you, that it's orienting us to the cosmos, it's grounding us in Earth's living systems, and it's nurturing us with water, air, food, and transforming us with education for action. That's the offering of this eco-spirituality and eco-justice perspective within a universe story unfolding. So thank you so much for listening, and I will enjoy very much a conversation with you. Anything that you want to discuss is fine. And Miriam, over to you to set up the context. But thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Mary Evelyn. It's of course wonderful to hear you. Thank you for these words. I would just like to highlight keywords and ideas you shared, and invite everyone to just take a moment to pause, to collect your thoughts of so many things you heard, and maybe write down in the chat box, if you feel like, what stands out. What's the word or the words that stands out of what you just heard? And how do you feel about that? And if you can just write in the chat box. Thank you, Debbie. We are all in the process. Hope. Thanks, Ed. Mary Evelyn, can I ask you to take off your share screen? Yes, yep. Good. So reverence, respect, responsibility. Thank you, Amanda. Vavili from Brazil. Resilience and hope. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm inviting everyone to just write in the chat box the words. Take a moment to pause and collect your thoughts. What stands out? Tami, hope, compassion, or energy, intimacy. Yeah, I'm gonna come back and start asking you, Mary Evelyn, to come back to this word intimacy. You mentioned that Thomas Berry talked about that. What's that intimacy? So let's just pause in a silence while we see here. Wholeness, new stories. Thank you, Nicola. Belonging. Cosmic beings. Thank you, Sam. Just reading here these words. Thank you. So as we do that, and I still want to encourage you to, for those of you who haven't written yet, to write down the keywords that stands out. Mary Evelyn talked about awe, right? Beauty, and the sun and the moon. And we just saw in the chat box someone who is joining us from China saying that in 2 hours there will be a very special moment in China. Thank you for sharing that. So how do you feel when you are really taking the time to look at the moon, the sun, and to appreciate the seasons? How do you feel? Can you write that in the chat box so that we can see the different feelings that emerge when you are at home? Thank you. Gratitude. Complete. Thank you, Sylvia. Humble. Thank you, Ed. So nice to just take a moment. How do I feel? And I'm saying this because in the education system nowadays, it's not really giving us much time to appreciate. And I feel that urban people are not necessarily taking the time to appreciate the sun, the moon, the seasons, and our connection with that. Okay, Mary Evelyn, thank you. Thank you, everyone. All in love. Thank you, Vanessa. Warm. Thank you, you. So you are the one who shared that in 2 hours there'll be a special moment in China with regards to the season. Mary Evelyn, intimacy. You mentioned that, and I do remember one of the key things I do remember from Thomas Berry is when I heard him in a talk about the horse. When the horse goes away, far away, and suddenly it's time to come back. And that feeling of coming back and the intimacy with home, the sense of home. I do have that very present in my feeling when I heard him talk about intimacy. Can you share with us what do you mean by that in your talk here? Go ahead.
That's great. And that was up at a conference in Maine, as I recall, that
Correct.
organized. And Thomas Berry said about coming home and the smell of home. And that was an intimacy that I think we all feel sometimes, even when we come into home and our parents are there, and there's this tremendous sense of intimacy, of care, of friendship that's hopefully unique and special. And I think of my own parents, and when we would take these incredible trips through Asia over many, many years, and we would come to their home just outside of New York and stay there for a few days and just tell the stories, you know, and this sense of telling the stories in a climate of family or friendship, that's an intimacy that's irreplaceable, isn't it? So intimacy is, of course, about family, about friendship, about the relations of parents and children, if you will. And sometimes they're tense, sometimes they're they aren't perfect. And that's where Thomas Berry would also say, we need this sense of intimacy in our human relations, whether it's with our partners, our lovers, our husbands, our friends, a deep intimacy that gives us a sense of confidence in ourselves, right? But also a sense of how we can give back. Now, Thomas Berry complemented that sense of intimacy by saying we need both intimacy and distance, which I found fascinating. Because if we go so far into this intimacy, sometimes we become, you know, needy and a little greedy or grabby, and we want so much, because intimacy is at the heart of human relations. So we need to develop distance as well and come back and sort of like a yin and a yang. And I think this is important not only for human relations, but for the earth. Right now, we've created such a distance, haven't we, from nature, from these systems, life systems. So we need to recreate ways of being deeply intimate. And as I said and mentioned in the chat, right now, it's the equinox around the planet. The Chinese in particular celebrate it with moon cakes and family gatherings and special food and so on. And everywhere in the world, this sense of change for an equinox is something that brings us into the seasonal rhythms of intimacy. In the spring equinox, the Japanese celebrate the unfolding of the cherry blossoms all across Japan from south to north, and they have parties under the cherry blossoms and celebrate the fleetingness of their appearance and then their decay. So this is getting a balance between intimacy and closeness and distance, so that our emotions, I think, don't get too sad or too despairing. And that's what we're developing both in our human relations and in our earth relations, a feeling for these extraordinary ecosystems in their seasonal changes and in what they bring to our spiritual consciousness, but letting go and coming back into contact. That's part of the rhythm of intimacy and distance, I think.
Thank you so much. I was thinking that it's not a coincidence that we are having this masterclass today, because it's the beginning of spring and the beginning of autumn, depending on where we are in the world.
Yes.
And certainly it's very interesting. We planned this in January, but not thinking about this. But so it's not just a coincidence. Last week I was in Brazil, so I was really feeling this beauty of the beginning of spring in the southern hemisphere. And I know everyone in the northern hemisphere, those who are paying attention to it, are in the moment of celebrating the beginning of autumn. Now, given that we have people who are joining us here from Guam to Japan to China. Saw someone here from Kenya. Thank you. And we all have different languages, right? By the way, I think Nicola made a point here about eco-linguistics. But you mentioned the word Tao.
Mm-hmm.
So I am not an English native, and I think many of us here in this room are not English native. And it's not necessarily like easy to understand what does that mean. Would you mind sharing what's the meaning, but also in the meaning of Tao in this moment that we are here looking at all of these, awe, beauty, interconnectedness, reverence, our relationship with nature, but also how to bring that into education. So what this word Tao and the understanding can help us move ahead in new direction.
It's such a great question. And, if we go to a perspective like Descartes, I think, therefore I am. That leaves out all the other sentient or thinking beings that we share this planet with. So that's the fundamental divide between us as self-reflective humans, Homo sapiens, wisdom men and women, but we haven't earned our title of sapiens, of wisdom keepers, because we've created this sense that we are above and controlling nature and so on. So the shift is, and Martin Buber, a great Jewish theologian, had this in mind. He said, it's not I, it, you see, it's not I am, but it's I, thou, meaning the thou is kinship, is you that's alive and speaking to me. And again, it's why Native peoples understand everything is speaking. And the biosemiotics that were spoken about, Eduardo Kohn in Thinking Like a Forest has this sense, everything has its own language. Peter Reason in the UK is doing this amazing work on how rivers speak to us and getting this broadened sense of knowing. So this, again, I'm emphasizing everyone who has pets know that they're communicating, right? Always. And extend that idea, as I said, to the animal world. I mean, how can birds migrate from South America, Tierra del Fuego, all the way up to James Bay in Canada? And this is the red-knot sandpiper. And those birds, small birds, migrate to the Chesapeake Bay in Maryland. They eat the eggs of the horseshoe crabs, who are 100 million years old, and they fly to James Bay in Canada. They summer there. They have their little babies. And here's the thing. The babies, red-knot sandpipers, fly all the way back across North America and South America to the tip. They stop in James Bay, eat the horseshoe crab eggs, and they do this alone without their parents. Now, migration to me is one of the great mysteries still not understood by scientists. In other words, it's an intelligence, it's a way of knowing, it's a sentience that's in birds for migration, it's in caribou across the great areas of northern Canada, it's in salmon coming back to the rivers where they were spawned and laying their eggs after being out in the ocean area to the same rivers. It's in turtles who come onto the land to lay their eggs. So migration patterns give us the sense of a thou, of living beings, you see, that have their own intelligences. And they're not just it to be exploited, they're kinship to be in relationship to. So that's the transition we're in. It's recovering of indigenous ways of knowing, of Chinese ways of knowing, to a sense of a communion of subjects, not a collection of objects.
Thank you so much. We are, in a few minutes, we are going to do a few minutes of breakout rooms so that people have time to have a conversation on this topic, on what is your, I'm going to start by asking you the question, to think about what is your understanding of eco-spirituality and this notion that the many ideas that we got from Mary Evelyn's presentation today. How did that help you to expand your understanding on eco-spirituality? And how do you envision bringing that to different education contexts? Education being formal, non-formal education contexts, of course, that we are all somehow involved. Before that, I would like to open the floor if anyone has a comment or a question to Mary Evelyn. If you would like, you can raise your hand. Depending on how many people raise the hand.
I just want to say to a couple comments while people are thinking of their question. I love John B's I and we. Ubuntu has this idea as well. And I love the point of Evelyn Lloyd, I think, that we've got so many distractions of consumerism and selfie nation. And I think consumerism is what distracts us from this deeper intimacy and relationship. We don't have TV. I didn't grow up with TV. I try and read headlines of news, but not absorb all the sad, bad news. We have to get protective ways of being. You see, this is part of what education can be. Say we have to have limits to the horrendous bad news coming at us, and also consumerism constantly. I don't buy things my mother gave me, her clothes, and so on. I don't like to go to the mall. I think many of us share this sort of feeling of repulsion against consumerism. So we've got to stand up to say, to be full human beings, we've got to be in touch with nature, with other humans, with communities, but reduce consumerism of media and stuff.
I have to just take a moment to pause and comment on what you just said, and I'll give you the floor, Sam. I saw you raise your hand in Maria Jose too. But you just mentioned about consumerism and the need to be careful of what we look at and receive, but also putting our minds into something that nurtures other things. So my comment is, I'm often in rooms where people say, question that working with values education in the Earth Charter, we are imposing something on other people. I always have to be very careful in that language of not imposing. And of course, I always emphasize it's not about vertical. But the point is that I always calls my attention is that materialism and consumerism, it's not shy from cultivating a materialistic life, right? There is advertisements, films, music, everything that we see out there are very explicit and not timid in nurturing a certain materialistic lifestyle. And I'm very concerned of how we have to give room and to be neutral and not impose values, and how to address this dilemma of not imposing. We're not talking about imposing sustainability or eco-spiritual or earth charter values, but also not shying away. So would you make a comment to that sort of neutral dilemma versus the world that is certainly not neutral in promoting materialistic values and lifestyle? Mary Evelyn.
Yeah. Well, I think as someone's saying, Evelyn, again, research and development for powerhouse advertising companies use our psychology to manipulate us, and we've got to censor ourselves. I think it's right on, namely the manipulation of Hollywood, of Wall Street, of advertising around the world is enormous. So I don't see that we can be neutral. I think we have to evoke new worldviews. That's what Journey of the Universe is trying to do, and we'll make that available to all of you. And these slides will be available if Miriam wishes to share them, and so on. We need a new worldview that creates new values. That's the whole point, like of reverence, respect, responsibility, and so on. So I don't see that we can be neutral when the Earth community is being destroyed. But I think the way to do it is not to preach, but evoke the changes and say, oh my goodness, if we came out of a 14 billion year universe and we're very late in the process, how can we destroy it? And so what's the value shift? What's the new ethics? What's the new spiritual vision? So we invite people into this, and our students love it. Why? Because materialism is dead matter. It's matter that doesn't matter. And it gives a sense of alienation from the world. It gives a sense of deep dissatisfaction, even depression. You can buy many, many things, but it doesn't fill up the spiritual void. So materialism is creating a deep sickness, deep alienation, and a deep, deep sense of depression, of eco-anxiety. So we've got to offer something new, something different. Students know this, young people know it, and certainly all of you on a Zoom like this know it as well. Mm-hmm. So not preaching, but evoking the changes.
Thank you. Sam, you can open your mic, and then Majo.
Hello. Thank you so very much. It's really been inspiring to listen to this. And I just want to thank you for all of your work. You made such a difference. Been in other venues with you. It's just want to applaud you for that. And thank you again. I loved what you just said about evoking and bringing out these questions and our natural sensibilities of the earth. I just think that's so very, very important to do. And it connects us to ourselves at the same time as it connects us outward. I've been very interested in some of the things that you've talked about. I've been recently going over a book by Satish Kumar, I'm sure you're familiar with, and his book Radical Love. And I love his love trinity of soil, soul, and society as he looks at our relationship with the earth, with ourselves, and with the others in our world and existence in a reciprocal and loving kindness facet. So he brings out something that I didn't realize is the word human has the same roots as humus, the word for soil. And so it reminded me of that quoted, we are a part of the universe, not a part from it. And so remembering that brings us into relation in a number of ways. And I guess the last thing I would like to comment on, and it's not so much a question, but some of the examples of celebrating the cherry blossoms and various facets, it reminds me of our need in this particular time to re-enchant our world with a sense of awe and wonder and creativity, imagination, imagining new models and new ways. And I think very much that is the work and the purpose and the enthusiasm of the Earth Charter, is that reimagining and a re-enchanted existence with ourselves and one another, and that sense of soil, the earth, soul, our own well-being, and service to the other in society, I think also kind of encapsulates some of the promise and hopefulness that those of us advocating the Earth Charter as a movement really hope. And my question would be, do you have a sense of a movement of movements today? this is a conversation going on widely, I think, of the disparate notions of people and organizations everywhere doing many of the same things. Do you have a sense of the movement of movements and how the Earth Charter can perhaps be an element in that? Thank you so much.
Well, Sam, thank you for your astute comments and your excellent question. Really appreciate it. And Kumar is a good friend for many years. We love him. We've been to Schumacher College to teach and show Journey of the Universe and so on. So Schumacher is, of course, one of these nodes of change, right? A great center with leaders of this idea, the animate Earth, by wonderful, I'm losing his name, but who's also at Schumacher. So I think as far as the movement of movements go, what I am referring to when I say, if you look at the internet, there's so many programs now along these lines of restoring, returning to, reviving our sense of Earth beings. I think Journey of the Universe adds our cosmic beings too. So there is a movement that's very vibrant, that's trying to cut through materialism that many of you are commenting on in the chat. Because as I say, materialism is a sickness that we're breaking out of. And I think the sadness and depression that many people are feeling is a moment of birth. It's this moment of breakdown to break through, so that human consciousness can evolve in positive ways that won't be drowned in materialism, reductionism, and so on. Let me say one other point here, is the reductionism of science that has said, and we've been in secular academia our whole life. I did my PhD at Columbia. We worked at Berkeley and at Harvard and now at Yale. Secular academia, as Miriam knows well from her efforts for education, is so reductionistic that religion, ethics, spirituality can't even be talked about. It's absolutely marginalized. And that's why the Earth Charter, with its tremendous spiritual sense, as you've said, and other movements are essential. Because if we accept both materialism in media and consumer forms and materialism in scientific forms, which say evolution has its own laws, its own processes, but it's random, it's purposeless, there's no meaning to evolution, that is as damaging as is materialism and consumerism. So we've got to break through that. I mean, the Chinese community with Confucianism and Taoism have a tremendous sense of the moral meaning of nature, and that's what we need to cultivate. Indigenous peoples have it. Latin American is filled with this sense of the spirituality of the earth, which is why it's been such a great support for the Earth Charter. So my sense of urging us is we cannot accept reductionism scientifically or materialistically. Now, let's say a movement of movements is already identifying those problems. And I think there is a movement of movements. I mean, Paul Hawken identified this as blessed unrest and so on some years back. And there's no question that there are movements of movements. Here's the difficulty is because of our high sense of individualism and personal creativity, our effort to develop community is often thwarted or stopped by kind of ego versus eco. You know, how do we join forces and say there's brilliance all around, there's creativity all around? And this applies politically, socially, economically, spiritually, environmentally. We have got to say we're part of an eco movement. And how we, and you know, I say this for myself, we're all part of this struggle of ego and eco. I'm not trying to say it's an easy one, but that's what we need for a true movement of movements, to say it's the planet that's at stake. It's the Earth community that's calling out, cry of the earth, cry of the poor. So anyway, great question. And I know there's more and I could say more, but thanks, Sam, and look forward to the other questions there.
Thank you. Maria Jose, you are in Mexico, right?
Yes, I am in Mexico right now. And thank you so much Mary, this was such an amazing morning to hear from you. And my question is particularly, so I'm writing my thesis, so send help, but I'm doing research particularly about the emotional perception of professionals, students, activists, and researchers who work in the climate change field. So there's sadly not a lot of studies about that, because people think that people who work like in humanities or like in activism, climate change, humanitarian crisis have to give their life for it, you know? So no one really asks like, how are these people feeling? How are their feelings giving them like an expiration date as professionals, you know, because it's unsustainable at some point. But my question in particular, I have like one you kind of answered already, and they're like interlinked. So the first one is that most of them, the people I have interviewed, especially the most like Western ones, see spirituality as something that we don't have time for. So because they say educating for spirituality requires time, and they say like, we don't have that time right now. We need to be practical, cold, and then time for spiritual growth. But this is such a strange thing for me. I hear it over and over again, and I thought it was very interesting. And the second one that you already replied to, Sam, was there was also some type of shame in evoking spirituality as a coping mechanism amongst scientists. Like, it was very frowned upon, particularly again in the most Western cultures. And I was wondering, why do you think this is? Like, it was just very interesting, because talking about coping mechanisms, it seems like it's such a personal thing. Like, you know, like you would be allowed to have your own mechanisms, but these people feel like they can't because it's frowned upon, or because it makes them less scientists, you know?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh. Well, again, those are two excellent questions, of which I hear secularism versus spirituality is the divide. And as someone said in the chat, science needs to be told with a sense of awe and beauty and wonder. But I've had scientists say, I can't speak about awe and beauty and wonder in my classroom because I wouldn't be taken seriously. That is the lacuna, the emptiness of how science is taught. I also want to say, though, in this notion of biosemiotics that John B. keeps bringing back, rightly so, of the communication of plants, of animals, of forests, and so on, in biosemiotics, and that scientists are joining forces. Some scientists are doing animal behavior work that say there's communication, there's culture among animals. Jane Goodall, you see, is probably the most famous scientist in the world, who began this sense there's sentience, there's community, there's families among the chimpanzee world. So I don't want to say science is all to blame, but I am saying in academia, the next generation is not accepting this, though. You see, they're trying to break down this reductionism and materialism of science. And I would also say, years ago, we were at a conference in Aspen in Colorado, where ANCAR, the National Climate Research Center, this was run by scientists. This was years ago. It could have been 15 or so. And the scientists themselves were in such despair that the climate science wasn't being communicated, because it was all models and numbers and reductionistic and presentations that would put everyone to sleep. There was no feeling. And the scientists could not be advocates for climate change. And it took them another 10 years to say humans are responsible for this and humans have to do something. James Hansen, our leading scientist in the US, has been attacked constantly for having a sense that scientists should be advocates. To be an advocate and a scientist at Yale is almost forbidden. So my point is, the scientists at this conference in Aspen were weeping for this sense of the division of ways of knowing. You see, some of them became therapists, Jungian therapists. One did a book with Columbia Press on his transition. So I am saying scientists have woken up. They're now being arrested, for climate change activism and so on. So it's breaking down. But we have to be strong advocates to say multiple ways of knowing are important. Science has a role, and no one is saying it doesn't. It has a huge role. We wouldn't know about climate change without it. Policy, law, technology, economics. We have to affirm all these ways of knowing, but to say the human transition requires a moral force. Now, let me give a concrete example. When I was in college in Washington, D.C., at Trinity, which was the women's part of Georgetown, Nancy Pelosi was 10 years ahead of me and so on. But we were all involved in civil rights. That's why I went to this college. Civil rights, anti-Vietnam War activism. And the civil rights movement was not growing until the moral force of Martin Luther King, of Jesse Jackson, of John Lewis came marching into DC and said, I have a dream. I have something larger. And that's what got the Civil Rights Act to pass. And I've always felt the environmental movement needs this moral force, you see, and it's there with the Earth Charter. It's there with certain individuals like Christina Figueres, who led the COP in Paris. People get this. And we just have to keep moving it forward and affirming it to say we want to work with science and policy, but we want to merge it with spirituality, morality, and meaning. That's the challenge. Thank you for a great question.
Thank you, Mary Evelyn. I just want to bring a few voices here that we read in the chat box. Evelyn Lloyd said, it's a strange paradox because science evokes emotion. And Joan Anderson, who's joining us from Japan, says, did you know that mice sing to each other? And Amal said that the way science is communicated is important to bridge eco-spirituality. The way we write scientific research to also highlight the awe, reverence of discoveries and innovation. Thank you, Amal, for that comment, to bring that into even scientific research. Yeah, so now I would like to invite all of you to go for maybe 8 minutes in breakout rooms to talk about the things you heard today on eco-spirituality, mindfulness, maybe on the beautiful overview that Mary Evelyn gave us and the voices of different religious tradition points on that are so similar. I think that gives a lot of strength to this. And then this question of the challenge that lies in our hands in how to infuse this into education. So I'll send you to breakout rooms and we'll come back here in 8 minutes. Mary Evelyn, you can take a few 8 minutes of rest and we'll be back here in plenary for the last round and hear also from the group's comments. Okay?
Great.
Thank you. So for those of you who can just click on the button to join the breakout room and go there for a little while so that you can get to know someone who might be here. And
I'll be back.
Yeah, sure. So let me encourage you, those of you who are still in the plenary, if you can click. And then let me see here, maybe Alicia or Amanda, you can. Okay, so we are back now in the plenary, and I think if someone has your mic open, I think we are hearing something. So you just, if you could just mute. And now I would like to invite anyone from you who are in the group to raise your hand, and if you want to share any insight you had from your group discussion and from this wonderful presentation we have like here. Let's use this last half an hour as a moment to hear one another, and at the end we'll bring back Mary Evelyn to give us. Okay, Debbie, please. Also in the middle of the night for you in Guam.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here.
I'm getting tired, but I just wanted to ask So we're looking at having an Earth Charter conference at our college in April. So I'm just wondering, like, if anyone would like to help, like if you would be have ideas. So I know, especially like for you, Miriam and Amanda and Alicia and Sam, like I learned from you guys, right, when I did the course. So if there's like certain guidelines or things or whatever support and ideas you guys
Sure.
can share, I would really appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure, Debbie. And we'll follow up on that. And I'm happy that you're making noise there. And we'll be happy to give some ideas. Filipa? Portugal, right? You're based in Portugal today, I guess.
I'm based in Portugal. Well, what we were talking about is I was with a Japanese girl and a Chinese girl, and I was telling them what I tell to my students and my kids is that there is so many religions and everybody thinks he's right and everybody thinks that's the religion, that I think what we need to understand is that each one can think in whatever they want, but the respect for community of life is the point that makes us all unit. Because if we respect each other, nature and animals, and that's it. Because there is a lot of fight because of religion, right? And the thing is that we are always going to be, I know that now, trying to connect all these religions, and I think that's it. Connect religions or just respect each other's thoughts and just base on care of and respect for community of life. If people understand that and the base is love and respect, I think things will go. And all the kids I talk to, they understand very well. This is so simple.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I guess I'm basic.
No, it's good. Yeah. Precisely because there is so much fight around different religions. People are, I would say, have moved so much away from religion or anything that has to do with spirituality, and actually there is a problem. So, Mary Evelyn, you can just note that, and at some point you can comment on that. I will be coming back to you. Thank you, Filipa, and also thank you for mentioning that you are in a group with, I think it's Wu from China and you from Japan. Thank you. Anyone else from our group would like to bring the voice of your group? I saw here room 4 was Anne-Catherine, Nicolas, Usuka, and Amal. Anyone from that group? Like to raise your hand and just take the floor to share any insight. This is a cold call from a room.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand.
Oh, no, that's fine. We can hear you. So Amal, the floor is yours.
Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, so basically, so my colleague from Japan, I'm so sorry, I forgot her name. She said something really interesting. And because, they have, she said it comes, naturally to her because of the way in Japan, there is this national connection to nature because of, their underlying religion of Buddhism and Shintoism especially. And of course, and then I think that's kind of a blessing, if you come from a background, and regardless if you actually are practicing that religion or not, but it's it's like it's part of your customs, it's part of your heritage, if you may. So that was one thing that came out of that. Another thing that we were talking about, that especially in education, eco-spirituality has to be experienced, preferably than just to be taught. And so children being in touch with nature, being in touch with fresh air, and it's not just a matter of taking it all in, but having understanding that you're also giving back so it's a reciprocated kind of relationship. Yeah. So yes, and then we went on to talk about again, about how we communicate and how a little bit on about how language influences how we communicate. And then the whole topic about science, how we can communicate and so on. Yeah. But it was mainly about that it has to be reciprocated.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you, Amal.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing the voice of your group. So there was a group with Alicia, Karina, Maria Jose, and Sarina. Anyone from that group would like to bring the voice or a comment or an
Sarina.
insight?
Sarina, do you want to say something?
Hi, yes. So, hi, I'm Zarina. But so I was in the group, I was just talking about how I was so not overwhelmed in a bad way, but overwhelmed in such a nice, like, to finally a breath of fresh air where we're able to see, especially the climate crisis, as something not just something that's happening to this planet, but something that's happening in like such a I don't know, in this kind of a spiritual sense, and how it's so beautiful and refreshing to see it being spoken about in not just a scientific, this is happening, but more so in a more, I don't know, in a way that involves the planet and in a more meaningful way, and gives it so much more power. And I found it all very, very beautiful, very, very beautiful. Pardon. Yeah.
Thank you, Sarina. Overwhelmed, but good.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, there was another group with Song Lee, Melinda, Sylvia Ferrero, and Ed Brandmeier. Anyone from that group would like to take the floor and share with us any thoughts, either from you or from insight you had from the group? Ed or Song Lee?
I didn't get a chance to talk in the group, and that's fine. I was just listening, and I really appreciated the value resonance. One person brought up the idea of guilt being used as a means of control from the Catholic Church, and I resonated with that as a Buddhist Catholic Quaker myself, somebody who has gone through different cultural traditions and religions and such. That was really powerful. But I was just left with the inspiration of resonating with core values, earth-centeredness, spirituality, via contemplative immersion in nature is what I'm all about. And I started pulling up a recent article I just submitted, and Dr. Tucker was talking, and I'm like, oh, we're saying very similar things, and it feels really good to have someone like you who's so inspiring, reinforcing these at so many levels. In the video, I haven't seen it. I'm going to see it. I shared it on Facebook already with my friends who are in the Global Peace Education Network. That's where I kind of rest my work in the field of peace education. And so just trying to spread this, and also resonating with what people have been saying. He said there's not a lot of men, that was a comment, not a lot of men here. It was in a comment in our small group, and I'm one of those men that are here in this group. And I do men's retreats, and I think it's an issue. I mean, we have to work on men being involved in this, and getting in touch with their feminine, masculine, and the earth, and caring and love, and being able to openly talk about that. So this is just really reassuring, reinforcing, and I thank you for the opportunity to be here.
I love
Thank you,
it.
Ed.
Lee, Song Lee.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mary Evelyn. I'm so proud of you for this excellent presentation. It's such inspiring, speech from the heart, from years of study and research. Excellent. Congratulations. One thing I'd like to mention here, besides Ed mentioned that we need more men to be involved. I'd like to see, maybe we need more Africans, because of the language, because of the distance, and I think this is also big young continents, and to what extent for future events and even for our movement have, them to be involved more. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you, Tongi. There was a group with Carlin, John, B. Mukherjee. Actually, Mukherjee, I don't know if you're still here, but Mukherjee is from Kenya. We have had a big group from Kenya, Kenyatta University, taking several of our courses. So Mukherjee, you were in that group 6. So any insight you had from your group?
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think, in group 6 with Luis from Brazil and with John from the US. And we reflected on what has been presented by our presenter, Mele. And we agree that it was a good presentation, which gave us some good insights. And what we observed is that from the presentation, we are able to see that when you look at most of the world religions, they promote that connection with nature, with the universe, so that as a human being, you are not just there as an individual, but you are connected to the universe. And I think we say that one of the things that we picked is that aspect of I and we, or I and thou, like Millie said. And we say that that is good because when you are looking at things from the thou or the we perspective, it means then that you're not focusing on yourself as an individual, but you're looking at how you are connected with the others and the universe. And I think that was quite illuminating. We also did ask ourselves maybe what it is that we are able to do in our respective countries or in our respective workstations. And I think Luis from Brazil said that maybe the challenge is he fights is this aspect of ecospirituality, maybe delivering that message and convincing people. It's a bit technical, and it could be a bit of a challenge because of the complexity of the issues surrounding the environment and all that. Then we did observe that on my part, I'm a Christian. My religion is I'm Christian, and from the presentation that was given by Mary, I think it was illuminating in the sense that I was able to reflect on the creation story in the Bible. And when you go to the Bible, the creation story is that God first created the earth. I think man was created later. And so what does that mean? It means then that as a human, as a man, I do not supersede earth. The earth comes first. And so that means then that I'm connected to it because I was made from the dust. I was created from the dust. And that means then if I do not take care of Mother Nature, then I cannot survive. So those are some of the illuminations that we got from the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to hear you. Maria Jose. Oh, yeah. Choose.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I was not in that group, but I wanted to follow the comment. Well, first of all, thank you, Mary Evelyn Tucker, for this masterclass and everyone that's joining us. And yes, I wanted to take this quote that John Beatty, an African philosopher, said that I am because we are, and since we are, therefore I am, and that's and Mary mentioned Ubuntu, and that deeply resonates like with all the essence of this conversation, and that we are because we find love and meaning and inspiration in the community of life. And I think that that is a very inspiring and amazing thing that I have from this conversation that we're having today. And yes, I just wanted to comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. It's good. John?
Thank you. I don't know if you can see me or not.
Yeah, we can see you.
I'm in Minnesota, the U.S. I made the comment about the I and we. I'm a retired family therapist, and a lot of the conversations in family work is around how to be an individual while always remaining belonging to a larger we. And usually these families are in conflict and not getting along at all. So framing it that way is helpful to families. So I like that it personalizes the I and thou a little bit. I also wanted to say, I was with Mukare and Luis. I have found in my retired work, I do a lot of environmental education, and eco-spirituality has been difficult to get to the spiritual part of that, not just the scientific part. But I would say that the one place I can talk to almost anybody from any religion is about the sacredness of the earth. And we don't have any conflicts about our different religious differences or anything. That I can almost always talk about how we share a commitment to helping with environmental causes for the sacredness of the earth. And I really appreciated that Mary Evelyn had that one place where she listed the different ways religions use a word for that, you know, the chi and the things like that. So I just wanted to tell her I really appreciated that. And I hope it's okay if I steal a lot of her ideas and use them in my local environment. So thank you.
Thank you.
That's great, Lon. So one last group, we cannot hear from everyone, but I really want to express my appreciation for all of you who have contributed with your comments, your thoughts, or your questions. There was a group with Kathy Fitzgerald Bowman, I think from Malawi, and Amanda, Nika. Anyone from that group would like just to come to the floor and share your... Kathy, you open your mic. Go ahead.
Thank you. And what a joyous afternoon, Mary Evelyn Tucker. I've followed your work for many years. I had a beautiful sharing just with Amanda and Bauman, and I just love the simplicity of your language, like this moral force, just even the image of Sam talking about that movement of movements, what that might look like. I think we're all probably wanting to know the answer to that question. Also, just in a personal reflection, when I came to the Earth Charter course, I'm an ecological art practitioner, and I'd been influenced by an art critic back in the 90s, Susie Glableek. She had been looking at Thomas Berry. So when I came to the Earth Charter and I found Thomas Berry again, and also Sam Neill had written about education as an art of reenchantment. That was the title of her book, Reenchanting the Arts. So that's and something that I probably will write about for you, Miriam. But and I also next week I'm in that strange place where I'm in a tiny think tank with academics, and here I am as an artist with a science background, and I want to talk about spirituality. So I've already reached out to Peter Blaise Corcoran as well from the Earth Charter community to help me. So thank you so much, Mary Evelyn and Miriam and everybody for organising this. And I'd love to hear Bauman say a few words as well, since he's from Malawi.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kathy. Yeah, maybe let me just join one of the previous participants who said something about maybe how we can include or introduce more of these projects in Africa, you know, as one of the youthful continent, and where issues to do with climate change and environmental issues, they are not just something like a disaster, but it's a matter of life. So, you know, so I think that is something that we have to do a lot. We need to, I like the concept of moral force and how this can affect our children when they grow up to have a respect and a care for the community life, because at the end of the day, we are all doing this for the goodness of our planet Earth. Yeah, that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mary Evelyn, the floor is yours. We have 10 more minutes. You can make comments to what you heard or just add. And of course, my own question here is around this challenge of theory and practice in education. So how to bring that, someone here said that we cannot just talk about eco-spirituality, we have to experience that, and how to bring that not in a only in a theoretical manner for primary schools, secondary schools, in higher education, if we are teaching law or business and still find a space for engineers or lawyers, those who are studying, to feel that or to experience. So, Mary Evelyn, to you.
Well, thank you all for your excellent questions, comments, perspectives. I so enjoyed hearing them, and hard to know, where to even start. But I think it was the problems and promise of religion was one big question, and that's what we say from the very beginning. Religion has been active in change. Ed mentions he's a Quaker, and they were so important for abolition. So we can't be monolithic about the problems of religion. We have to say that all cultures are deeply impacted by their religious traditions. And I could say a lot about China here, which maybe if I have time, I will. But anyway, if we recognize from the beginning, and as many of you said in the chat, religions do share a sense of respect for life, for the respect for the earth community, and so on. And that's where we need to begin. So Ubuntu, I did mention, and Maria picked it up again. I am because we are. And that's exactly where we need to go. So African philosophers like John are contributing hugely to this, and Satish Kumar picks up Ubuntu as well. The earth comes first from Mukare from Africa. Thank you so much for those comments. And Bowman's comments also from Africa. I really, really appreciate that. And I agree with Son Lee that we need more presence from the African community and the Asian community, I would say, as well. And Ed B., your comments were terrific, and so appreciate them. And along with John B., you both have great insights. And John, my husband's from North Dakota and went to St. John's in Minnesota, and we're going to be out there to help St. John's do their eco-spirituality work in this great university. And Kathy with re-enchantment, that's exactly the point that we need to come to, and many people are. And when Bowman said the moral force is what we need, I think that's at the heart of the matter. And several of you have put other comments of books and so on in the chat. So thank you for all of that. And Miriam comes back to this question of theory and practice, and that's why I say eco-spirituality and eco-justice. Cry of the earth, cry of the poor, and the encyclical, and so on. And we can take the Catholic Church, as Ed said, tremendous problems. I come out of a social justice tradition of Catholicism, and was very inspired, as I say, by civil rights and so on. But the church has many, many problems, to put it mildly. But this Pope is a fairly enlightened human being and one of the great leaders on the planet, along with the Dalai Lama and the Secretary General of the United Nations, one of the great spokespersons for the moral dimension of this. So, those three leaders are in a category by themselves. And that's really hopeful. So what I want to say here at the end is the theory and praxis are evident in the body of work for Journey of the Universe and for the religion and ecology work. On our website, in the religion and ecology, we have engaged projects from all over the world of tree planting, of forest restoration, of river cleanup, and so on. So it's ideas and action continually. We have a whole section on the SDGs and what the faith communities are doing there. And we've got 6 online courses in world religions and ecology. They're free for audit. And I'm not trying to advertise these. I'm just saying these are open source sources on the world's religions and ecology, and a massive website of 1,000 pages where Laudato Si is mentioned, and a whole range of other topics like climate change. And Journey of the Universe, I'll send Miriam immediately our flyer that gives you direct access to the film. But don't miss the conversations or podcasts, you see, that have both scientists and environmental activists working together. And those courses, one is on the film and the book, One is on the conversations with Coursera, and one is on Thomas Berry's worldview. So all of these materials, I really hope that you can utilize in any way possible. I recommend Sam King as a resource for our outreach for Journey of the Universe. And we have newsletters for both of these projects that you can sign up for, Journey of the Universe and Religion and Ecology. I see one person has maybe a final question. That's up to Miriam, but I could talk forever, but I want to thank you, honor you for your questions, comments, and participation. So, Miriam, back to you.
Thank you, Mary Evelyn. Well, yes, I think if Mary Evelyn is willing to share, we were, of course, willing to share the slides, or the PowerPoint with you via email. As you know, I mean, there's a lot of knowledge that Mary Evelyn shared here, and certainly, Mary Evelyn, we would love to share your PowerPoint with those who joined us today, if you're willing to. So we are coming to a close because of time. Mary Evelyn is actually expected to join us for our conference next year, mid-April conference, or Earth Charter conference, that we are looking at ways to explore the intersection of ecological civilization and education. So how can we reimagine education? So the title of the conference is Reimagining Education for Ecological Civilization. And Mary Evelyn, I hope, or you are expected to be there with us. I am actually envisioning that conference also as a space for East-Western dialogue on what ecological civilization means, and what does that means to how can we bring that in a more explicit way to different education contexts. Thank you so much, Mary Evelyn, for continuing to inspiring us. As I was hearing you, I remember that 10 years ago, you came to Costa Rica in 2013, you did several talks, including the presentation of the Journey of the Universe in Spanish. I'm glad to hear that now it's available also in, among other languages, in Chinese. So I will have to close, and thank you everyone for joining us today, especially you, Mary Evelyn, for taking your time and inspiring us and giving us this wonderful presentation. Thank you everyone for your comments. So the last Thursday of next month, we will have a conversation with Carlos Nobre, who is one of the most famous scientists. So he's a scientist from Brazil, looking at what can we learn from the Amazon forest. So you're all invited, of course, to join Carlos Nobre on the potential of bioeconomy of the forest. So that's the topic that he has been actually working from. There was so much talk here today about bringing this into science, and he has been working on the challenge and potential of a new bioeconomy of the Amazon forest. Anyway, thank you, everyone. If for those of you who are still here, if you want to write one word of your takeaway from this experience today, you are invited to write that in the chat box. And if not, big hug,